Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you happen to be. This is a lecture that I normally do in my seated class, and it normally takes 45 minutes to an hour, but I'm going to ambitiously try to do it in something like 15 minutes. That means I'm going to skim through a lot of the materials, but I've posted the actual file to the course, so you can go through the slides yourself and look at them. For example, I want to start here with a general definition of culture. I'm going to skip past this because it's listed as being on page 15 of your introduction in the textbook, and because you can, again, go back to the slideshow and look at that general definition of culture. I do want to note very quickly that culture and society are used interchangeably throughout this entire course, whereas if you took something like the sociology course, they would be separate and distinct different terms. So just, for the sake of argument, for any of you who know that culture and society are two different things, in this course I'm going to treat them like they're the same thing, just for purposes of simplicity. I also want to talk here at the beginning of the entire semester about ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism is a term that, as it says here from oxfordbibliographies.com, is a term that's applied to culture or ethnic bias, and that is our tendency to judge other groups through the lens of our own culture. I want to try to make sure that we don't do that this semester as we study other cultures that have influenced the South, or as we think about our own culture. I don't want to judge it too harshly, nor do I want to just simply praise it. What I would rather do is study the history of it and how it formed, and talk about the ways that it impacts the present. So keep this particular bias in mind. It does play a role in any study of culture, because we do tend to devalue, whether, as it says here, consciously or not, other cultures because we judge them through the lens of our own culture. All right, I just want to note these quick examples of ethnocentrism to give you an idea of it. Columbus, as soon as he arrived in the Indies, began taking advantage of people. He just assumed that he had the right to do that. He stole people and put them on his ship and took them back home with no care or regard for their families, or even allowing them to say goodbye. Manifest Destiny, the idea that we should go west, young man, I think is the way that it used to be phrased. Just assume that we had the right to do that and run people off of the land that happened to live there at those locations. So these are great examples, but the bottom one actually applies to the South. The forcible sterilization of thousands of minorities during the period of 1929 to 1960 was based on a we know better policy that was secretly implemented by a eugenics board across the region, and that was in North Carolina. These were white doctors who thought that they knew better than minorities, which would be African American females, and they would take them into the hospital and say things like, oh, it's just appendicitis, and then they would put them under and remove their reproductive organs because they would evaluate whether or not they thought that that person deserved to have children. So again, ethnocentrism is a very powerful thing, and it's a very ugly thing. So as we go through this semester, keep that in the back of your head, because it's something I'm going to try to avoid as much as possible. All right, and I'm going to skip past the pictures. Skip past these pictures. I want to get to a couple of other pieces of content. I'm going to give you this thought experiment just to kind of trigger your thinking about what culture is and isn't. The thought experiment is, in short, that you have a man named Pierre, and Pierre comes from France, and one day he reads about the American South, and he decides to move to the American South, and he changes his accent. He learns English, and then studies English so rigorously that he knows exactly where y'all goes and ain't goes and bless your heart and all those things from the South. He changes his clothes. He starts eating, all the stuff that we eat here in the South. He changes himself so that he is indistinguishable from a normal Southern individual. Is Pierre Southern? By the way, he changed his name to Billy Bob as well. So is he Southern? Now, a lot of my students, when I do this in a seated class, will say, no, absolutely not. He's not Southern. He's French. But why? Right? That's the thought I want you to ponder. Why? What makes him French? If he's adopted all the Southern ways and he's sworn off France and he's going to be an American Southerner for the rest of his life, why is he not? Why do you not consider him an American Southerner? And by the way, that goes the other way around. Let's say that Larry the Cable Guy, the guy I have pictured here, swears off the American South and everything about it, moves to France, and does the opposite of what Pierre does. He learns impeccable French. He can speak it with a Parisian accent. Is he French, or is he still Southern? And a lot of students, oh no, he's still Southern. What about when he has kids, and his kid grows up as a Frenchman, and then learns that his father has abandoned the American South and moves back? Students say, no, that guy's French. Why? I want you guys to be thinking about that. Why? Where does culture come from? Where are the boundaries around culture? Those are the sorts of things we're going to be looking at this semester. All right, in order to do that study, I'm going to broadly define all culture into 2 different categories. And we'll be talking about these throughout the entire time that we have together. Those will be material and non-material pieces of culture. Material pieces of culture are anything that you can touch, see, or hold. So when you go to a museum, everything in the museum that you can see inside of like a glass case is a material piece of culture, whereas a non-material piece of culture is something that you cannot touch, see, or hold. I'm going to spend basically the rest of this slideshow looking at material and non-material pieces of culture and trying to broaden your scope of what constitutes culture in these 2 different ways. So this is a material piece of culture. You can go and see it. But what they did with this particular structure is non-material. Same thing goes with this. Gladiator fights. These were material pieces of culture. But what they did with those implements and how they fought, the strategies that they used were non-material. Same thing with the bathhouse. You know, that's a material piece, but the non-material aspect is the public mores that people use when they would engage with one another inside of that structure. All right, so you get the ideas here. I'm going to jump forward and I'm going to look at some problematic aspects. What about language? Is that material or non-material? Language teeters on the edge. The material aspect is that you can see it there in front of you, but the non-material aspect is that you have to understand the language to be able to read it and engage with it. So again, skipping forward, a couple of components of culture. These would be things that you see around you that are non-material pieces of culture. Things like waiting in line or for a parking space. We have certain mores that we use, certain norms that we use. We put on our turn signal if we're waiting for a parking space. And if somebody pulls in front of us and takes that parking space when we have our turn signal on, you better believe there's going to be a case of road rage, cursing at people. We don't do that. Unless somebody takes our parking space, but we don't normally do that. However, there are cultures out there who will say, I can't believe you took my parking space. I'll curse you for 1,000 generations and all of your children. But hey, you want to go get a sandwich? That's just the norm. They just talk to each other like that. Politeness, same thing. If we accidentally bump somebody, if we burp or fart in public, those are components of culture, and the ways that we handle those things are different worldwide. For example, in some cultures, it is perfectly polite and acceptable and expected to burp after a meal to signal to the chef that you appreciated that meal. Bathroom etiquette is another big one. You can ask any guy. If you're a girl, my wife did not know about this until I explained it to her. But, I wish she would. She's never been in a men's bathroom. But if you're at one stall and there are 2 more stalls, the next guy that comes in needs to go to the one that's 2 away, right? Because that's how it is. That's how it makes sense. You ask any guy, the guy's going to admit no one ever explained that to him. He just picked up on it. However, if that guy has ever been around a European man, the European man pees right there, right next to him. And they will sort of chase Americans around the room because their ideas of public spaces are very, very different ideas from those of American people. So this is not just basic common sense. We tend to think of it that way, but it's not just basic common sense. A couple of others, I'm going to let you guys read through these on your own, but I would also encourage you to think of how these apply to the American South. So which direction do you face in an elevator? That's a very American thing. How much personal space do you need? That's a very American thing as well. Is it okay to put whiskey on the gums of children? That is a very Southern thing, traditionally speaking. So, read through these slides and try to pick up on some of the ideas inherent in here. All right, ideas of legality as well. Coca-Cola, this very innocent thing that's a material piece of culture, by the way, used to have cocaine as one of its main ingredients. That's actually where it gets its name from. Coca-Cola is cocaine cola. That's where it got its name. So ideas of legality boil down to today, we would never put cocaine in a drink. But when Coca-Cola was invented, they put cocaine in there as a way to alleviate stomach cramps and other minor ailments. So you would go down to the pharmacist invented Coca-Cola, and ask for the Coca-Cola just because you didn't feel very well. Ideas of, I'm going to use this quick example. If you go to Ireland and you are attacked by a swan, you cannot fight back. Absolutely not. It's illegal to harm a swan. And if the swan attacks you and you punch the swan to try to defend yourself, you're going to jail because that's their national bird, and they protect it with every ounce of the law that they can. All right, so moving forward, ideas of personal space, ideas of gender. We're going to be looking at that this semester as well. So the gender roles that people play and how those manifest. And by the way, let me at least go ahead and cast this forward. Gender roles are not what you probably think they are. Most people that come into this class have the wrong idea based on popular media, but we're going to look at the sociological definition and apply that to concepts of culture. All right, this picture makes Americans very uncomfortable. It's a funny picture, especially when people caption it, but it makes Americans very uncomfortable. We do not want a baby in a picture with beer. However, if you go to, again, a place like Ireland, children very often show up in pubs, not because adults go there to get drunk. It's actually the opposite. The reason that this picture makes Americans uncomfortable is because when Americans drink, they generally drink to get drunk. When Irish people drink, they do not drink to get drunk. They drink because they want to socialize. So those are two totally different things, and that's why, again, this makes us uncomfortable, whereas an Irish person would say, yeah, it looks like a Saturday afternoon or something like that. So again, that is not basic common sense. I'm telling you, if you're having a negative reaction to this picture right now, that's a very ethnocentric behavior. You're judging it through the lens of your own culture. Children shouldn't be around beer. Well, it depends on how the adult is consuming it and for what purpose. We're going to skip past marijuana. That would be a longer discussion, and I'm limiting myself again to 15 minutes. So ideas of beauty as well. I'm just going to use these two quick examples, and you can look up more if you want to, especially if you're going to do a journal for this class. So it used to be that our idea of beauty for women was that women needed to be large. This was during the Baroque period, which was not very long after the Black Death swept through. And so a larger woman indicated that the woman was healthy, and that's what people would look for. A skeletal, thin woman, like what we look at in today's modern society, would be considered ugly because that woman would be considered sickly looking. As well, people used to think that black teeth were attractive, and it's because the rich people could afford sugary treats and poor people couldn't. So poor people actually bought blacking agents to put on their teeth in order to make them look like they have rotten teeth, because that made them look like they were rich. So again, what you think of as normal today was quite different in the past. Body language, a couple of quick things. Almost every single thing you see here on this slide is offensive in other places. This means something, I can't tell you what, because I'll get myself in trouble. Same thing here. Same thing here. All of these things mean something terribly offensive in other corners of the world. All right, how we gesture. If I want somebody to come here, I say, come here. If you go to other parts of the world, it's actually this, right? Just going to kind of skim through some of those, skim through some of that. I'm going to talk about writing just for a quick second. In our form of writing, we write left to right. In other forms of writing, they write top down. In other forms of writing, Arabic writing, they write from right to left. And it used to be, in our own form of writing, that people conceptualize writing like plowing a field. You go to the end of the line, go down and back, down, back, down, back. Got very confusing. That's why they went back to left, right, or not back to. That's why they created left, right, left, right, left, right. All right, symbols. Another material piece of culture. The Nazi symbol actually did used to mean peace, and it was used quite prevalently across all society, including our own. Coca-Cola even advertised using it. Today we look at this and we feel very uncomfortable by it. If we look at something like the American eagle and think, oh, how wonderful, this symbolizes freedom, until you realize that the Nazis used it too. Or, again, if you're thinking of it in ethnocentric ways, unless you're a Native American individual, in which case it does not signify freedom. It signifies something quite different. Okay, I'm going to cut it off here because I've given you, I think, plenty of examples that you can dig into. If you have any questions about this, please feel free to email me. This video is very short, very quick, but it gets the point out there and it gets you started thinking about culture. I look forward to working with you this semester. Again, if you have any questions, let me know.